what can we do differently to to push forward, to embrace this power of yes and push against those societal constructs, the traditional view of leadership and what it takes to be a leader. Clara, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off for this one.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Because I feel, for example, I came from a background of having to figure out what leadership was. I think a big part to me to be able to say yes is to have examples of what you're saying yes to. And so finding, and usually they're not around you, but finding those role models is a very strong word, but just people who are doing similar things to what you think you have to do next somewhere else, and piping into that network of other people you know at other companies or other groups that help you give a picture of what is it that you're saying yes to, and then being able to take that step. Because I find that the lack of role models and the lack of people to look up to that we have in our own ladder makes it really hard to even know what you're agreeing to or what you're stepping into. Bar the fact that sometimes you're being asked to step up to something that you're already doing and you're like, yeah, yes. But I find that mystery is the hardest part, right? Like not really having a picture of what's next and having to kind of crowdsource that information yourself to carve that path. I find that's what, but again, I feel like I'm the least brave of the four here in that I've been on that one very particular path for a long time. And I'm curious, like Jackie, and the jumping into different opportunities, I think also is a way of really saying yes and then jumping in with both feet, right?
Yeah, I would just say, again, going back to some of the things we've said, just saying yes to some things, similar to what Clara, you were saying. I didn't necessarily know what I was agreeing to. Hindsight, maybe I should have thought about it a little bit more, but I did it anyways, right? So sometimes actually not knowing is a good thing, because you just come out to it a lot braver, and you know, like, oh, here's what I think I need to do. But I think I've been quite privileged with the fact that I've also had really great managers who just kind of let me go on with things, and they'll only step in if I ask them to. So they'll say, okay, do you need support? Say, no, I'm still trying to figure it out. And okay, they'll back off. They'll just let me kind of figure it out. But they would be there if I need them, which has been a great thing. So if you have that kind of support network, and in my case, it was the managers, that was definitely helpful. And that's kind of how I found my way to where I am now, by saying yes and not necessarily knowing right off the bat what I'll do, but then just grabbing the opportunity, figuring it out, sense checking it so that I'm not doing something completely wrong, obviously, and then just kind of moving on and making it my own.
Having worked with Maia, that's exactly what she does and did when working together, which is, so she really is a brilliant example of somebody.
But you asked me to do something, Melanie, that I haven't done.
But yeah, but I genuinely think she really is a perfect example of somebody to me who's gone, I don't know, why don't I try this, and took and step forward into things. And I think, yeah, that's not somebody making a suggestion and hasn't lived it. There's somebody making a suggestion who's done it. So this, I don't know if this is going to make sense what I'm about to say, but I don't know how many people know about or have worked in kind of a space where people talk about situational leadership a lot and changing your leadership style to match the people who you're working with. When I went through a training course a few years ago at a company, and we went into lots around situational leadership and given the book and learned about it. And now that I've said that, I'm going to just quickly explain my version, which is probably going to be a terrible way of describing it to everybody, but essentially people can be in like 4 phases. If you imagine an axis of willing and able, people move from not willing and not able round in an axis clockwise to willing and able. And as people move through different roles and in different places, they move into these kind of different spaces. So you could be at the top of your game, ready to kind of be promoted, and therefore you're probably in the very willing, very able space, and your manager is able to delegate a lot to you, doesn't really need to be that involved in terms of what you're doing. If you get a promotion, you will move, consciously or not, into not willing, not able, because you're right at the beginning, something new. You have to you reset, and ideally the manager that you're working with would be thinking this through and be saying, oh, actually, just promoted somebody, whether that's your new manager or your old manager's promoted you, would be thinking, actually, now I can't just delegate anymore because they're in a new place and I need to start thinking differently in terms of how I manage them. The reason why this is very close in my mind is because I have recently not done this with one of my team and realized a bit late that I hadn't done it. I hadn't reset myself in my thinking. But the thing that I think is interesting and why I'm mentioning it is because I think having become conscious of it myself as a manager, I've also tried to retrofit that for myself as a person myself. So in terms of like, I'm in a position now, how well am I able to do this? How much do I understand the situation I'm in? How willing and able am I? And therefore, what support do I need from my manager or managers around me, my peers, etc. And then I've kind of thought, actually, you can't just delegate this to me. I'll put my hands up myself and say, I don't know how to do this, because as much as I'm willing and I'm excited, I don't know how. And there's no reason why I should, because this is new and different and it's a new world for me to step into. Or alternatively, someone's being very prescriptive about what to do, to be able to turn and say, don't worry, I've got this. I know how to do it. Let me come back to you. I'll just tell you exactly what I'm going to do. So kind of reverse doing the situational leadership, I guess I don't even know what the phrase would be, but kind of taking the theory of it and thinking, how do I want to be managed, or how do I want to be supported by people around me, to help me figure out what I'm saying yes or no to, and put myself in the right position. I'm waving my arms around because I'm drawing the axes the whole time I'm doing it, but just imagine.
I think
I
that's
literally drew it in my notepad, Melanie, as you were explaining it. It's great. Yeah, thank you.
I would say for me, Philly, just, adding to what you're saying is vulnerability, and to what Melanie was saying, right? I think a lot of people think leadership is, now that I have this title, I'm supposed to know all things all the time, everywhere, for everyone. You don't. And it kind of goes back to something I said in the beginning, right? You've been given this opportunity to lead, and those leaders around you are supposed to be helping you in that quest, right? Obviously, there are some things that they saw in you. There are some foundations that you've come with that have qualified you to get to that role. But really, I think good leadership, first and foremost, for me, is being a good listener. Right? The things that, if you're going from an individual contributor to a leadership role, the things that made you successful as an individual contributor no longer going to be the things that are going to make you great as a leader. So I always tell people who are going from that role to leaders, first start listening, because now you're serving others, right? It's very much a servant leader role, right? And then vulnerability. Right? The person who's now giving you this opportunity as a leader needs to understand where you are able and have proficiency or feel confident in going forth in those leadership areas, and they need to be aware where you're not able, where you have vulnerabilities. And it's okay to say, or to have those oh shit moments, right? I started a new role 5 months ago. I was 8 weeks in and I was fully transparent. I was excited. It was great. But I had a moment where I went to my leader and I was like, I am so happy to be here. This is wonderful, wonderful. But oh shit, like the magnitude of what I have to do. I am freaking out. And she started to laugh and I just data dumped, and then I was fine. The best quality is to have humility, have some vulnerability, and to listen. It's really important to harness those listening skills. So those are my tidbits right there.
I was going to add, I feel like it's vulnerability mixed with the willingness of wanting to figure it out, right? A lot of the time, like, I won't have answers for people who are looking at me but being honest and saying, I don't know, but showing that you will put the effort into figuring it out, and whether it's going to your leadership and saying, I need help with this, or going and finding answers. Like, I think that the fact that people trust you to go figure it out, even if you don't know it now, is huge, right?
I think, like, when you were speaking, Jackie, you reminded me of something that I've said previously, but I think my view is that there isn't a lot of room for ego, or at least outward ego, when you're a leader. Your role isn't, my view of it is, your role isn't to shine. It's to help others to shine. You're supposed to be helping build others up. And I think I've, the first time I started to step into much more senior positions, and I'd see people go, oh, your team's doing an amazing job. And I'd think, oh, no one's saying I've done an amazing job. Oh, have I done an amazing job? And I'd have that moment of having to kind of check myself and go, it doesn't matter. If your team are being successful and the people around you are successful, that is your success. That's what your success measure can be. And I think that switch you make at certain points in your career where you start to realize this isn't about me. It's about the other people around me. My job is to help them grow and develop. And when you get to a point where you feel like that's your success and that you're doing that well, I think you can get to a really positive place for yourself.
Yeah, 100% to everything everyone has said. So the only thing I would add is on the honesty, so the transparency of what you're doing. So if someone has asked you to help them, someone has come to you with a problem, someone is trying to get a promotion, whatever it is, just be very transparent with what. So you're hearing them out. You know that they want to solve something. What can you do for them? And sometimes the answer is, I can't do anything right now, right? There is something else that's going on in the company or with your performance, whatever it is, but I can't right now. But that doesn't mean I haven't heard it, doesn't mean I won't keep thinking about it. So just revisit that with them on kind of a fairly regular basis until you can actually do something for them. Because I found that sometimes people get resentful when they just bring you a problem and they're like, oh yeah, I heard you. And then you never go back to them. So yeah, great that you've heard them, but so what? That's the only thing that I wanted to add.
I was going to mention, related to what Melanie was saying, of like the job of the leader is to make the team succeed, right? And I find that loops a lot into self-confidence, because I found that the more you're leading teams, the less you have that very concrete, like, I achieved this sort of moments. Like, especially as an engineer, like, I used to write code and you could measure like amount of lines of code written this week. And the more you grow into leadership, the more your job becomes so ambiguous, because it's more about coordinating people and enabling people and being able to be that lead without being the boss, right? Because at the end of the day, at least in my company, like, you're not the boss, you're the person trying to get convincing everyone to do the right thing and trying to steer the train in the right direction. And it gets very kind of non-concrete and really hard to measure and hard to feel like you're accomplishing things yourself. But then you have to take on the angle you were saying of like, well, if the team is achieving a lot, then you are achieving a lot. And realizing that, yeah, and I remember when I was very junior, someone pointed this out to me by saying, notice how your VP is always thanking everyone. Like, they send all these emails, thank you everyone for all. They said, well, why do you think they do that? It's because they get to claim everything that the team did as theirs, right? And it's true. Like, there's this angle of, to leadership, what you've achieved is what they've achieved.
Amazing. Thank you all. And so just to close this section on how and who we are, there was a quote that Alex actually put in here, which is from Judy Garland, which was, always be a first-rate version of yourself and not a second-rate version of someone else. And I just love that. So I slot that in there. So I'm going to hand you back over to Alex for the final section.